Reality television, the final frontier. These are the Soyages of the USS Bravo Outsider, our ongoing mission to explore strange new episodes, to seek out new whys and new situations, to boldly watch what this they them has not watched before.
Excellent.
I teared up a little. That was emotional.
Thank you. That music always gets me. It's hits you right in the feels.
It really is iconic. The music to the intro to Star Trek.
For me, it was just like childhood, like the only good times with my dad, basically.
Well, we were just kind of chatting before things got going, and I was saying there's probably a very small crossover, like intersection of fans that are fans of like Real Housewives and fans of Star Trek. So this is mostly to like indulge me, but
yeah, if there was a Venn diagram, it would just be the room you're sitting in right now. That would be in
I think you might
space.
be surprised because like the first time I had really heard of Real Housewives in like the modern era, I was listening to like my favorite Marxist conspiracy podcast, TrueAnon, and
Nice.
They had an entire episode about Real Housewives. And I'm like, really? I guess folks like me like that kind of thing.
Yeah. I've listened to that episode too. It's a great one. Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, if Liz likes it, it can't be all bad. It's interesting. Especially from like a cultural anthropology perspective, like looking in from the outside, it's like real interesting.
yeah, for sure. I think like it's definitely like culturally significant for sure, and I think like it's a very like narratively dense experience, which is something that you also get with Star Trek in a very different form. And
Yes.
When I was kind of like proposing our discussion topic before we get into it, I was a little bit nervous that it might not be like very fruitful for things to like pull out, and like we might be making a stretch of it. But I was like actually shocked by how many notes and how much like came to mind as I was really mulling over the ideas. So I'm really curious to get your takes. But before we get there, do you want to kind of give a background on kind of your past experience with any sort of reality TV, or if any of these shows were previously on your radar in any respect?
So I'm going to be quite honest. I feel like reality TV in a lot of ways is antithetical to my beliefs, or at least it has been used in antithesis of my beliefs. As a Marxist and as an active IWW member, I am very like pro-union, and historically, reality TV has been used to try to, create shows and productions with less union jobs. Because basically on reality TV, the only unionized work usually there is going to be the editor, who is like kind of the powerhouse of the whole thing. But, no unionized writers, no unionized like set designers usually. I don't know, maybe in this, it seems like the production value for this is high enough to where they might have set designers and stuff like that. But, historically, I've just like never watched reality television because, it is kind of inherently pro-capitalist and anti-union. Now, I also say that, like, full discretion here, I do like some media that is inherently pro-capitalist and anti-union. Like, I'm a big wrestling fan, and I understand one of you is too.
Sean, our previous guest.
It was Sean's. Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, yeah, the episode I was listening to. So, yeah, I'm in that. Honestly, yeah, it doesn't really reflect my value set, but I'm still into it. But I feel like reality television in general is like a lot of it is like one big ad,
Yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from there, and I think like we've got some upcoming discussions that we'll get into it a bit more in later episodes. But I think this is a good opportunity to kind of wade into the territory, because there is like a real life example of kind of this reality television being at odds with unions
Mhm.
going on right now with the
Yeah.
writers' strike.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Mhm.
right. And I thought it
you
was
know,
especially like pertinent now, and I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
that's a weird thing because I was going to kind of bring this up anyway, and then after you invited me, it came up, and I'm like, oh shoot, how am I going to talk about this now? So, but I guess it's more pertinent. So yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I'm sure. Well, I shouldn't like assume, but
Mhm.
I am sure that there are like union positions that kind of make up the gap. I'm sure there's a producers union or something that people that are like filling those storytelling chairs that
Mhm.
would otherwise be filled by writers. They would be in another unionized role,
Mhm.
because it's kind of like it's a it's a canvas for like editors and producers more so than it would be writers.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Writers or actors who are also unionized
yeah,
generally. So
yeah, and I doubt there is a reality TV actors union,
there
but there
absolutely is
should
not.
be.
There. Yeah. That would be interesting because I
Yeah.
mean, the thing too is like these people are all very directly benefiting from the exposure that reality television is giving them, especially in a Banner House Rules. Like it's a big ad for all these different little micro companies that they all have, and
For
it's
sure.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
also, like, they are absolutely workers that need protection, like,
Mhm.
by putting themselves out there, like, more so than even actors, because
Right.
they're putting their
Their
true
reputations on the line.
reputations
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
line, and to not have a set of protections in place that
Mhm.
collective bargaining could provide for them.
Yeah.
They definitely should be looking at unionizing, although I think the idea of reality TV personality being a profession is kind of like, it's kind of nebulous, because if you're on
Right.
like a single season of like Big Brother and then that's it, are
Can you get life
does that
benefits from the
qualify
union?
you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
exactly. So but yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think you also like brought up the point of the like the political lens that
Mhm.
we view reality TV through, and that's another discussion that I want to get into in a future episode. But since you brought it up, I think like obviously the cast members, especially on the Real Housewives, where they're
Mhm.
very affluent, I think they typically would probably lean pretty like conservative. But
Mhm.
I kind of find that the lens that these shows are presented through doesn't lean as far right. Like,
No,
I
definitely no.
mean,
The creatives behind this obviously don't. I don't think they necessarily have any sort of political agenda. Definitely not as much as the people on the show seem to sometimes have.
yeah, I mean, I think that they are at least catering to the politics of the general audience of these shows,
It is
which
very accessible. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, which like it skews female, um it skews gay, and
Hmm.
like it skews to demographics that would typically be left of center, not
Yeah.
not
Absolutely.
super like far left,
Hmm.
in but um traditionally more left than right.
Yeah, like suburban white. Yeah, gay and women. Yeah, definitely for
Yeah.
sure.
Awesome. Well, I want to jump right into our discussion. So, I selected an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine to
Hmm.
kind of compare and like contrast against Real Housewives and Vanderpump Rules. Just mostly to use that as kind of like a launching point
Hmm.
into a discussion more broadly about Trek, because I think you mentioned in our the conversation that we were having before we got rolling,
Hmm.
it is very interesting to take two seemingly separate pieces of art and try to juxtapose them against each other, and see what comes out of that comparison and what comes out of that exercise. So I'm really excited.
Absolutely.
I selected an episode from Star Trek Deep Space Nine season 6 called "In the Pale Moonlight,"
I
which
mean, I'm
it
gonna be honest. You selected the episode of DS9. Like this is if you want to introduce people to the show and get them to like love the main actor, the captain, like you show them this episode.
Yeah, and so how I kind of like arrived at this, not only is it like an episode that like kind of stands out in my mind as like being a particularly engaging episode of Deep Space Nine, but also I think it bucks a lot of the conventions of Trek in a certain way,
Hmm.
and I think that when I was rewatching it, I was especially like surprised to see certain like structural components in it that really reminded me of Real Housewives.
Hmm.
Before I like take over the conversation with what I've identified, did you want to kind of give your what your perspective of like this exercise was when I announced it?
Um, yeah, sure. Like, so, I thought, like, I love taking way too much meaning in everything, and so I thought this was going to be a fun exercise, and it was like, and I watched the DS9 episode last night, like right after I watched Real Housewives and Vanderhouse Rules, and it was I'm sorry, is it Vanderhouse or Vanderpump? For some,
Vanderpump.
Yeah.
I've been calling it Vanderhouse because I'm just thinking House Rules for some reason. Sorry, Vanderpump Rules. But like, so this DS9 episode, like the perspective of the entire thing is done from one person's perspective, and that's like completely juxtaposed to the reality thing where it's just a bunch, an ensemble, and it's always showing their different perspectives, kind of, but just only in the situations that they're in, and then
Yeah.
kind of like how they're talked about in other situations, which is interesting, and it has similarities therein where, you know um in the DS9 episode, it just follows the captain, Benjamin Sisko, as he goes around. And I don't know if you noticed, but every single scene has Benjamin Sisko in it
Yeah.
in the episode. And so it's just him making a bunch of deals, dropping hot gossip, telling people to shut up or I'll kill you. Stuff like that, which is, a lot of what like the Real Housewives is, but to a lesser degree. More
Yeah.
like throwing drinks and things like that. But yeah, I don't know what was your perspective on why did you choose that episode in particular? Because I assumed you've seen it before.
Yeah, I have. And actually, so what kind of got me thinking about this episode in particular? I was going through an exercise of one thing that I was planning on asking you was to if there were any like characters in these shows that you kind of correlated to any of the characters on Star Trek, and I was going through that mental exercise for myself,
Hmm.
and it was actually like very challenging because I was, there was one person that
Hmm.
on Vanderpump Rules that stood out to me like right away as a direct like comparison. We'll get into that when we get there.
Hmm.
But everyone else, I was like, oh, it's Garrick. Oh, it's Garrick. It's Garrick. Everyone is a Garrick.
Garrick is just he's such a like a gay catty bitch, and I love him. Everything about. I mean, I feel something deep in my soul for Garrick. I feel like I
Oh yeah,
am a Garrick in a way, in a much more benevolent way. I don't like kill people or anything like that, but like, I love uh, uh, always having planned ahead of other people. And that's what the episode is kind of about. Benjamin Sisko the captain tries to do a plan to give their side an upper hand in a war.
yeah,
But his plan fails miserably. And he had made the plan with Garrick in the first place. And then Garrick turns around and had another plan all along to do violence and achieve the same goal. And he does it in a much worse way, but both of them were planning on doing a war crime. Garrick just does the slightly worse war crime, and Benjamin Sisko is like, god damn it, and he punches him a couple times. It's it's really fun. It's a much more exaggerated version of, and obviously it's sci-fi, so there's a lot of allegory to real life there.
yeah.
But it's very exaggerated in every way. But you know, the one character that I kept on thinking about when watching Real Housewives was Senator Vreenak, the Romulan senator,
Oh, okay.
because his side is winning the war at that point, the
Yeah,
side he's allied with, and he just comes on board, and he is just malicious and just like dissing Benjamin Sisko the entire time, and just like
very like
dropping
smug.
shade.
Yeah.
He's dropping. He's the shadiest bitch, and he's like every single one of the women, but like 2 on Real Housewives from the episode we saw.
Yeah. I think like when I was watching this episode, just like story wise, and I think this would probably be hard to pick up on without like a lot of context on Real Housewives or these types of shows.
Absolutely.
Because it didn't like seem like I wouldn't be able to tie this episode of Deep Space Nine directly to an episode of Real Housewives. But I think that I could tie this episode of Deep Space Nine to like a season of Real Housewives. Like this is like the dynamics that we see play out over the course of this episode of Deep Space Nine is very similar to something that we constantly see on Housewives, where someone has a plan and does it like has a plan on how they are going to like use a piece of information or like get to whatever their end goal is, and they put it into action, and you know they have to recruit like some other member of the cast in order to like help them or just, you know, bounce ideas off of. And you see the snowball effect of, you know, putting that plan into place and bringing other people in, and just how things, you know, have a bit of a like a domino effect. And that's exactly what happens in this Deep Space Nine episode, and that's something that you see, you know, almost every season of Real Housewives. So I thought it was like particularly fitting. And then when I was rewatching it for this, I had forgotten that the way that this is structured is interspersed with Cisco giving his, you know, his personal log.
Yeah, which is so reality television. Yeah,
it's a confessional.
Confession booth. Yeah.
It's exactly like a confessional, and it was really like really interesting to see that. And I think like that, you know, Star Trek always is, or almost always is, like prefaced with, you know, captain's log or other like some other officer's log. Like every episode is actually like framed as, you know, someone's perspective, and it's typically like a senior Starfleet officer.
Absolutely.
So like you can interpret every episode as being like from a character's, you know, perspective. And I mean, I think that's the same sort of mechanism that Real Housewives uses when they are trying to frame certain pieces of a scene or story in perspective. They will use that Housewives, either their title card or giving their confessionals, and do that same sort of storytelling mechanism.
Yeah, and now that I think about it, like they do have like a constant narrative that basically they open up with and then they execute at the end. Like in Housewives, it was the bridal shower. In Vanderpump Rules, I mean, the whole thing basically, in one way or another, was about Rochelle and Tom, and their whole did they don't they, which Tom did. I know for a fact. It has to. He's a terrible liar. Terrible liar. Worst liar ever.
So bad.
Also, gayest mustache I've ever seen. It's fabulous, but bisexual vibes.
So he shaved it off live on, well, I guess not live, but during a recording of Howie Mandel's podcast where
Did he like do it to go back in the closet or something? Like,
So you're spot on. He was sleeping with Raquel.
Excellent.
Yeah, and
excellent.
it blew
up. I mean, not
off.
Excellent. That's bad because
no, it's excellent.
Is it okay? Good.
Well, I mean, it's excellent for like fans of chaos.
Something, and she's like 20 something.
Yeah. Well, we see her turn like 28 or something like that, and I think she's 40.
Yeah, she was turning 28 in that episode. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, it blew up off camera, and so they had to get all the like production teams rolling again in order to capture the fallout, so they could tack it on to the end of this.
Of course. I mean, that's what this whole episode's about. You got to pay off with that Chekhov's gun there.
Yeah, for sure. Before we move into Vanderpump Rules,
Mhm.
Dylan, you're like a bit more of a like Star Trek outsider, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
mean, I love the
what?
original series. I watch the original series all the time. Like,
Okay.
I will constantly just revisit those episodes. Like,
Mhm.
for me, I don't watch a ton of scripted TV, but
Mhm.
that's my favorite show. Like for me, you just got a show with a bunch of cool actors wearing like really dope, brightly colored mod outfits, and they're visiting a planet where there's going to be like some classically trained theatrical actor wearing a toga,
Oh yeah.
walking among like foam rubber spires and Greco-Roman columns, and he'll be like vanquished and turned into a glittering slime creature because somebody pointed out a flaw in his aesthetics or something.
That
That's like the greatest thing that TV. The episode will be called like "Who has seen the hands of time" or something like that. That shit rules. I love that stuff so
yeah.
much.
Yeah.
So I never really like went beyond that. This is the first time I've ever watched an episode of Deep Space Nine. Was just for this.
Wild.
So,
What'd you
so
think? What was your impression?
it was cool. It was
Uh,
cool. I liked it for sure. I was surprised by how good the cast was. Like there kept being actors. So they'd be like, "Oh, he's in it."
oh,
Like you guys were talking about how awesome Garrick is. Yeah,
Andrew Robinson.
Andrew
Oh
Robinson
yeah.
rules. Such a
if,
good actor.
if you haven't seen him play Liberace in, I think, the
Ooh, I have not.
1987 made-for-TV film, it's available on like YouTube.
That
He
sounds
is
like great casting.
incredible.
Oh, I
He's
can picture it.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mostly think of like Hellraiser, Dirty Harry, where he's
Yeah.
the bad guy. Yeah,
Mhm.
so just a very talented actor, even though he's
And
wearing that alligator face. Still
I
doing
I
great.
think that like Trek has a very it has a way of like latching on to actors that might not be like into Trek when they get cast.
Mhm.
And I think he's a very iconic example of it because he's like he wrote one of the Star Trek novels, like one of the like
Oh, yeah.
most
Seed in Time,
acclaimed
something like that.
yeah
Thread in Time. Yeah.
yeah Thread in Time or something like that. Yeah, so like he is Star Trek royalty, and I agree that like Garrick is like one of the best characters in Trek.
Mhm.
And to like kind of get into characters in Trek versus Housewives, I think like that's one of the things that are kind of at odds between these two series. Like I think like all the characters on Trek for the most part,
Mhm.
they're modeled after kind of like um pulpy heroes and like archetypes within that vein that they will use to like Star Trek is just like a series of like morality plays that
Absolutely.
play out
Yeah.
like week after week.
Mhm.
And so they will like plug these characters in. They will like choose whatever theme they want to explore in this story and like create some alien or some like planet or some like conflict that will, you they can use as a proxy for that idea that they want to explore and then like crank it up to 11 and play it out. At least like that's where I think like Trek really excels.
Mhm.
But a lot of the characters, especially like within Starfleet, are very rooted on the like the good side of the like good versus evil spectrum.
Mhm.
They don't oscillate very much. They certainly like if they do kind of move their position, they
Mhm.
don't really it's not kind of like a long progression in most cases from one side to the next. It kind of resets at the end of the episode or the arc, the
Mhm.
storytelling arc. And that's one of the things that like stands out about Garrick is he is a character that is very like nebulous and like he oscillates on the fence. Like is he good, is he bad? Like there's so many like questions
He's
surrounding
neither
him.
good nor bad. He's effective.
Yeah. And I think that that's like that is a housewife, like a good like housewife. And I think
Mhm.
all the characters that you see on Housewives, they're never really rooted in like in good or bad. They
Mhm.
are constantly like fluctuating between like good guy and bad guy. And if you're watching for long enough, if you are like rooting for a particular housewife,
Mhm.
you will see them like become the villain and then go back to the hero and like I mean there's a couple that will just like be firmly like rooted in like villainy and just
Mhm.
like stay there. But for the most part, they fluctuate through the gray area, and um, so that's why he kind of stood out to me as like a very like I wanted to select an episode that had Garrick in it because
Mhm.
I think he's the most interesting character
He
to
is.
kind of explore within
Mhm.
this comparison context.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really jumped out for me too, compared to like original Trek, which they often have cool moral puzzles at the heart of an episode.
Mhm.
But like the crew of the Enterprise in the original show is like a well-oiled machine. They're all kind of on the same page.
Mhm.
You pretty much always see them like being in line, like following commands and stuff. They're like always shown as a good team that knows how to act properly. But in the ship in Deep Space Nine, it really struck me how there's like this atmosphere of suspicion and paranoia, and like the captain keeps consulting with these people who he doesn't really like very much and doesn't know how
Mhm.
much he can trust them, and they don't know how much they can trust the captain. And that kind of that weird atmosphere of not really knowing if people have secret agendas, or if they do have secret agendas, if you can still work with them anyways. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That moral murkiness, which, like you said, Craig, that's one of the things I love most about reality TV. As much as the showrunners may want to have heroes and villains, it all becomes a murky human playing field where
Mhm.
people aren't like just good guys and bad guys, and it's all everybody is. A lot of these people seem really shitty, but you're also like really love them because you recognize their like normal human emotions, and how hard it is to try to put them in a box and put them on a straight track like a bead on a wire and be like, you're going to this point. But no, they start doing something else because they're people, and people are just gonna act in unexpected ways. And I like the way that like moral readings kind of get blown up in a way. Not blown up. You could still very much put a moral lens on any Housewives show, but trying to put a character in a box is going to be a fool's errand unless you're really trying to force it.
And
Yeah, I think like that atmosphere that you're talking about, the like sort of the paranoia that you see within this episode of Deep Space Nine, and you see it like a lot in Deep Space Nine. They really set like Voyager up to like be able to excel there, but then they just like they dropped it so quickly. Like the idea for Voyager is like you've got a crew of like Bajoran freedom fighters that have to merge with a Starfleet crew, and uh, there should be like a lot more tension. Like
mhm.
you see them set it up for it,
There
and then
is
it's
tension in the
dropped.
first season, but they just totally
Yeah.
cool it off within like the first half. And sorry to correct you, but it's Maquis Freedom Fighters. That I just
Oh yeah.
compulsion. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, they really did drop the ball on Voyager. But I think all of that, like the moral grayness and everything, really kind of may be why like DS9 is by far the favorite Star Trek of Marxist, and apparently a lot of Marxists actually like reality television too, is because there is like this moral grayness that recognizes the fact that people and things can always change based on their material conditions. There is no
Mm.
such thing necessarily as a moral good or a moral bad. There's just what can help more people, basically.
Yeah, and I think this episode in particular, like you do see characters change on Deep Space Nine. At least
Mhm.
specifically like Cisco. We see this episode
Cisco, yeah,
as
he's
like a
circling the drain.
culmination of like him him learning from his experiences and evolving, which is something that you see in Housewives and reality TV in general a
Mhm.
lot. Like their past experiences play a real have a real impact on how they deal with future situations because they're real people, and as constructed as the situations are, they are still responding as real people.
Mhm.
And you see that in this episode of Cisco, where he's like, you know what, I can live with like what I've done.
Mhm.
And I contrast this with kind of the storyline that Picard has in the Next Generation, where he gets assimilated. You see him like affected by it,
Mhm.
but only in isolated like situations that play for the story. It's not as like deeply of like a reorientation as Cisco seems to experience.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Cool. Well, let's jump into Vanderpump Rules.
All right.
First off, did anyone on this cast remind you of any Star Trek characters?
Oh, I actually didn't really write any of that down. As we're going through it, I might start making some comparisons. I mean, in general, everyone seems just a little bit Romulan because they all seem pretty backstabby, which is the big Romulan trait.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a couple Ferengis here and there. You know, some of the worst fillers do look a little like the Ferengi cheekbones. So, you know, yeah. Yeah, not in general. Yeah, they were just an interesting cast of characters, though. I generally liked this show a lot better than Real Housewives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that we've been hearing a lot, and this is a particularly like great season of Vanderpump Rules,
Mhm.
and New Jersey has been great, but I think like it really requires a lot of like context in order to
I feel like
appreciate it.
there's too
So
many characters almost, or just like it's just an overload, especially watching an episode for the first time. I don't feel like I get to know anybody by the end of the episode. Whereas in Vanderpump Rules, I got at least one villain and one person who I don't love, but I think she's kind of a baddie, so I'm down with her.
is it Raquel?
It's actually Lala. Or
Oh,
Lala?
okay.
Yeah. She seems honest, at least.
Yeah, Lala is one of Dylan's like very noted favorites. I like appreciate Lala like quite a bit as well.
Yeah,
The reason
I've been defending her a lot this season, even though she's had some terrible episodes, which I've pointed out. But you get two sides of her. She can be extremely self-serving and say terrible things, but can also be like a straight dealing, real friend who like really stands up for the other woman in her life. So, like all these characters, she's got a lot of complexity, but I generally like her.
The reason I brought up Raquel is because she was the person that I immediately identified a proxy for in Star Trek,
Who's
and Barclay. I thought like this is Barclay because
Wait. Slow it down for the non-Trekkies over here. Which one's Barclay?
Reginald Barclay. He was on TNG and Voyager.
But he wasn't in the episode we watched.
No.
He starts out on TNG as a very socially awkward guy, probably like autistic code in a way, like has a very hard time like dealing with social interactions and stuff. And they have some stuff about that. But then by the time he gets to Voyager, he like becomes like a real like player in the series and like helps Voyager communicate with Earth before they get home, which helps him a lot. And it's a nice story arc for him. But so where do you think Raquel is in his story arc right now?
So I think like she's on a journey kind of like finding out who Raquel is. Like she's on this like journey of self discovery and like trying to work out that. And I think
it was a huge part of this episode, right? It was almost like the culmination of that storyline in a way, I think.
Yeah, and one of the things about like Barclay is like when he's first introduced, like he's like very underestimated and like really at like kind of a like you said, like he's really awkward and kind of reaches like a turning point in his life. And I think he still never really fits in by the end of Voyager. Like even when he's like, you know, he has like a strong hand in like getting Voyager home. He's still like battling his own demons, and
he is. I mean, he has like friends though. He has like a friend in Deanna, and he has the respect of his peers at that point too. Whereas before, he was really struggling, especially on the Enterprise and TNG. Like you never saw an episode with Barclay where he was like, you know, really doing well for himself.
Yeah, and you could still see him like potentially like taking a heel turn, you know, maybe after Voyager ends, he becomes a conservative radio personality or something like that.
For those who don't know, the actor did.
Yeah.
Dwight,
that's BM those.
Yeah, Dwight Schultz or whatever.
but yeah, like this is something that we see with Raquel, like taking an off-camera like heel turn as well. Like she's having this episode or this like arc where she's like kind of finding herself. There's still like questions about her, but she's like coming into her own with a friend group, and I just saw so many parallels between her story and like Barkley, both like within the the Trek world as well as in the meta.